From the San Francisco Public Press, you're listening to Civic. Military veterans are struggling as the federal government imposes massive cuts to the public workforce and the Department of Veterans Affairs. The most vulnerable veterans are facing loss of support for serious mental health challenges, permanent disability, and homelessness.
We lost a housing specialist who assists homeless veterans with finding and maintaining their housing.
And with veterans making up nearly 30% of the federal workforce, many are losing their own jobs.
That was definitely a shock. Is this almost a joke? They said, no, this is true, and you're not the only one that this has happened to.
In this episode, we'll explore how job cuts under the Trump administration are breaking the nation's compact with its warriors and its military workers. We'll hear from veterans who are pushing back and saying our lives are not a game.
Veterans are not toy soldiers. They're not to be thrown away when you're finished with them.
I'm Sylvie Sturm, and this is Civic. Many Americans may not realize just how unique we are in how we express gratitude for veterans. Other nations tend to approach military commemoration with more restraint. In the UK, for example, Remembrance Day focuses on loss and reflection over pride or celebration. But American culture puts reverence on full display. Parades, military flyovers, tributes at sports events, support our troops bumper stickers, Memorial Day, military discounts, patriotic imagery, and they receive numerous benefits like healthcare, education, housing, and employment support. Most Americans say we should be spending even more to support those who served. The message is loud and clear. This country honors its veterans. Still, many veterans feel deeply uncertain about their future. A Military Times survey found that the vast majority are worried that significant funding cuts could make their lives harder. The Trump administration has already fired 2,400 employees at Veterans Affairs and plans to cut 83,000 more, nearly 1/5 of its entire staff. These are the people who help veterans access vital services like healthcare, housing, and mental health counseling. And it doesn't stop there. Many veterans are also losing their own jobs, as the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, established by Elon Musk, fires hundreds of thousands of federal workers. A third of those workers are veterans. That's the result of a deliberate hiring preference policy that aims to support those who have served in the military. Like Andrew Tarosian, who served in the Coast Guard. Today, he works in Oakland, helping unhoused veterans find stable housing. He's part of HUD-VASH, a partnership between the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the VA's supportive housing team. Tarosian helps veterans through every step of the housing process, from filing paperwork for subsidies, to convincing landlords to rent to them, to finding furniture and basic home goods. The job pays less than he could make elsewhere, but Tarosian says he wanted to help.
I actually went to find something in property management, but I came across this job and I thought this would be a great opportunity to use my real estate experience and also my prior military experience to help veterans out. It's been the best job I've ever had. Very rewarding. The pay is definitely, it was the best, but it was the fact that it was so rewarding to be able to help these veterans find housing made up for that, definitely. The feeling that you get when, you've housed a veteran and you can really see the appreciation in them. It's kind of hard to explain, but you can really tell how appreciative they are of, your services and what you've done for them and everything like that. And that makes it all the worthwhile.
Tarosian got about 40 veterans housed during his one-year probationary period. His supervisor gave him the highest marks possible at his year-end review in February, but then he got an email from the U.S. Office of Personnel Management.
They essentially told me that I did not meet the requirements of my probationary contract, which was pretty surprising to me because I had my 1-year evaluation and I had received outstanding marks, which is the highest you could get. I had immediate concern for the veterans that I was currently helping. I had 5 veterans that were in the process of, being housed within the next week or two. Then I had no way of following up with them. And that was definitely a shock to me. And I had to go to my supervisor immediately and go, is this, what's going on? Is this almost a joke or what, and he contacted our manager and they said, no, this is true. And you're not the only one that this has happened to.
In fact, Terosian is far from the only one. As of April, the Office of Personnel Management fired about 16,000 probationary workers and ordered federal agencies to fire most remaining new employees, an estimated 200,000 people. A court challenge briefly reversed the firings, but the U.S. Supreme Court let them stand. The justices ruled that the nonprofits filing suit lacked legal standing. That decision opened the door to massive layoffs across departments like Health and Human Services, the Federal Aviation Administration, and Veterans Affairs. Here's VA Secretary Doug Collins.
President Trump has a mandate for generational change in Washington, and that's exactly what we're going to deliver at the VA. There are many people complaining about the changes we're making at the VA. But what most of them are really saying is, let's just keep doing the same thing at the VA has always done. No, not going to happen. The days of kicking the can down the road and measuring VA's progress by how much money it spends and how many people it employs rather than how many veterans it helps are over. The VA has been a punching bag among veterans, Congress, and the media for decades. Things need to change. We owe America's veterans and the hundreds and thousands of excellent VA employees solutions. For many years, veterans have been asking for a more efficient, accountable, and transparent VA. This administration is finally going to give the veterans what they want.
But VA data shows that veterans are more satisfied than ever with the care they're getting. A study by the department itself found that last year, 80% of veterans said they trusted the VA across a wide range of services, from disability compensation and education benefits to home loans. That's up from just half in 2016. And the study showed that when it comes to health care, more than 90% said they trusted the VA for things like scheduling, pharmacy, lab imaging, and patient safety. VA hospitals vastly outperform private hospitals in patient satisfaction. Two recent studies found that over 75% of VA facilities earned 4 or 5 stars for care quality, compared to less than half of non-VA hospitals. That's not to say there's no need for improvement, especially when it comes to mental health. Investigations by the VA's Office of Inspector General dating back to 2020 found systemic problems in how veterans with mental illness are treated. In one case, a veteran died by suicide in the parking lot of a South Carolina clinic. A 2021 report said his care was, quote, deficient. He had a known history of mental health issues, but clinicians didn't follow up on urgent referrals from the Veterans Crisis Line and appointments for pain management. Another case in Georgia in 2020 found similar failures. Emergency department staff at a VA medical center didn't tell suicide prevention staff about a patient in crisis. He never got the follow-up care he needed and died by suicide 6 days later. These tragedies underline real gaps in the system. But according to union leader Mark Smith, a massive overhaul that rids the department of people that Collins called non-mission critical is not the solution.
What we know is that pretty much any occupation in healthcare is a mission critical occupation, whether you're a janitor or a registered nurse. We all need each other to do the work.
Smith represents workers at the San Francisco VA healthcare system as president of the National Federation of Federal Employees Local 1. He's also an occupational therapist at the San Francisco VA Medical Center.
If a janitor is terminated and then the OR is not clean, that impacts the ability for doctors and nurses to do their jobs. If a scheduler, somebody who schedules the appointments for primary care providers or for mental health professionals, is terminated and there aren't enough people to schedule the appointments, it becomes much more difficult for the primary care provider or the mental health therapist to do their job. We have VA police who help maintain safety and security in the hospital and, on the grounds of the VA. Those police are really critical to making sure our nurses are safe in the emergency room and responding to incidences on the grounds. And a police dispatcher who was probationary was terminated. We're already understaffed with policing as it is. And so then, police officers were having to work the dispatch line, and it has this cascading impact.
Reduction in VA funding is typically pitched as efficiency measures or cost-saving reforms. Sometimes it's framed as expanding, quote, veteran choice by increasing access to private care providers. Take the 2014 Veterans Choice Program and the 2018 Mission Act. Both were intended to reduce long wait times by allowing eligible veterans to see private doctors on the VA's dime. But instead, they resulted in longer waits and higher costs for taxpayers. That's according to an analysis of VA claims data by ProPublica and PolitiFact. Still, some veterans support limited privatization, especially those in underserved areas. Gabriel Iturbi did 5 tours in Iraq as Army military police. He came home for good in 2009.
When it comes to privatizing, I wouldn't look at it. I see it as more subcontracting. Subcontracting some medical procedures to be done at locations other than the VA, I think is not a bad idea. But when it comes to mental health, I draw the line there. My job over there every day was to search cars, vehicles, and people for bombs, V-beds, and IEDs and suicide vests. And in short, it did a number on me, right? I also got hurt in Iraq during an attack. It was nothing too major, but that deployment was my 5th. And undoubtedly, I did not come back the same person after that. I was under a lot of pressure. I was stressed. I was depressed. I had anxiety. I felt hopeless. I didn't know what to do with myself. I knew I needed change, and asking for help was the first thing that I needed to do. And I did. And that journey regarding my self-care, regarding change and rebuilding and healing and, revising and all those other positive words or reinforcements when it comes to those struggles, it led me to various programs and services for veterans. I know individuals who are psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers and therapists, and they're very capable. They've had the training, they have the credentials and the education, the master's degree and the licensing. But when it comes to helping vets, it's a whole different story.
Research backs him up. Studies show that privatizing care often results in worse outcomes for veterans. And for critics, that's no accident. They see privatization as a stealth strategy to defund and dismantle the VA, then blame the system's decline to justify even deeper cuts. That's how Bruce Carruthers sees it.
You can't balance the budget on the back of veterans.
Carruthers is a Vietnam Army veteran and a former member of the Senior Executive Service at the VA, which oversees national programs and long-term strategy.
You can't say, well, now we're not going to take care of these veterans. And if people say it's expensive, my response is that's the cost of having a huge military-industrial complex and being involved in so many conflicts around the world. If you don't want to spend so much money on veterans' care, don't have the kind of military we have and don't become involved in so many conflicts. But as long as they're going to do that, those who answer the call to duty have to be taken care of afterwards. Veterans are not toy soldiers. They're not to be thrown away when you're finished with them.
Veterans advocates say care from the VA is not interchangeable with what's available in the private sector. VA clinicians are specially trained to understand the unique psychological, physical, and cultural challenges faced by veterans. That distinction is too often misunderstood, according to Suzanne Gordon, a journalist and healthcare researcher. She's reported on the VA since 2009 and has written several books on the topic.
I think people don't understand what the system does. And they look at a VA hospital and they say, oh, that's a hospital. Then they look over, 3 blocks away and they see another hospital. So they say, oh, well, these patients could go from this hospital, one hospital, to another hospital, right? A patient's a patient's a patient. There's no difference in patients. There's no difference in doctors. There's no difference in hospitals. There's no understanding of nuance or difference or specialization or expertise. We don't understand that these patients are different, that the system is different, that what goes on in the exam rooms is different. I think that underpinning all this is just a vast ignorance about what healthcare is, and just, this kind of stupidity and ignorance about what it takes to deliver it.
Gordon fears that care for some veterans may be stripped altogether based on suggestions by Trump's top strategists, like Russell Vought, one of the architects behind the administration's efforts to restructure federal agencies. Vought argues that many veterans file for minor conditions just to qualify for compensation, which infuriates Gordon.
This is an administration that is staffed with people who think that PTSD is just a bad hair day, who think that, veteran homelessness and suicide is overblown, who thinks that the only thing we should be giving people benefits and care for are, amputations and things that you can kind of see. Every vet in America, every 19 million of them, should be infuriated by that, whether they voted for Trump or not. This is a continuation of the suckers and losers attitude that Trump announced in his first administration. And whatever you believe about America's wars, and I'm not fond of them, people signed up, whether it was being conscripted or volunteering. They signed up, they were promised benefits, and now they want to cut them.
Veterans have been let down repeatedly throughout U.S. history. But their refusal to stay silent is the reason meaningful support exists today. As far back as the 1770s, the Continental Congress promised lifetime pensions and land bounties to Revolutionary War soldiers. But after the war, Congress lacked funds, and many veterans never received what they were owed. Their anger was part of what fueled Shays' Rebellion in 1786, an uprising led by veterans frustrated by debt, high taxes, and unfulfilled promises. After more than a century of veteran dissatisfaction, activism, and piecemeal reforms, President Herbert Hoover signed an executive order in 1930 that created the Veterans Administration, consolidating 3 federal agencies dealing with veterans. Still, whenever funding pressures increased, veterans' needs would go by the wayside. In 1932, during the Great Depression, 17,000 World War I veterans and their families marched on Washington, demanding early pay of a promised cash bonus. The bonus was scheduled for 1945, 13 years later. They built a massive tent encampment called Hooverville on federal land near the Capitol, staying peacefully for weeks while pressing Congress to pass legislation to release the money early. The Senate voted it down, but the veterans refused to leave. Finally, under orders from Hoover, Generals Douglas MacArthur and George Patton led a military assault on the camp. Troops on horseback and in tanks used tear gas and bayonets and set the camp on fire. The image of American troops violently evicting destitute veterans enraged the public and is widely believed to have cost Hoover the next election, which he lost to Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt also opposed early bonus payments, but he responded differently. He offered the veterans jobs in the Civilian Conservation Corps. Finally, in 1936, the veterans won. Congress passed the Adjusted Compensation Payment Act, granting the long-awaited bonuses. This marked a shift in congressional willingness to intervene in veterans' welfare, establishing the precedent that they deserved structured, dependable federal benefits. The lessons of the 1930s shaped policy thinking for the next big conflict. When World War II ended, Congress passed the GI Bill, offering tuition assistance, home loans, business loans, and unemployment compensation. Though Black veterans were nearly entirely marginalized, excluded, or denied equal access. Over time, legal reforms and civil rights advances improved formal access, but disparities in health, housing, and disability ratings still persist today. World War II marked the first time that benefits were administered through the VA. That solidified its role as a comprehensive support system for returning service members. But those supports fell short once again when the next generation of soldiers began coming home. Michael Blecker is an Army veteran with combat infantry service in Vietnam. He has spent the last 50 years helping his fellow veterans access VA benefits through an organization called Swords to Plowshares. The nonprofit provides housing, mental health care, legal aid, employment services, and case management, tailored to meet the complex needs of those who served. Swords to Plowshares was founded in San Francisco by Vietnam veterans who saw firsthand the lack of support for those returning from war.
Well, the Veterans Administration is all fed by the World War II vets and their needs. So there were no programs for younger vets, zero. You had to fit into the existing World War II notches, and that meant zero mental health. It's sad to say, but it went on especially among the World War II veterans. They felt that the Vietnam vets had really they weren't deserving. They weren't winning the war, so they didn't back us at all. We were like part of that whole, doing drugs and all that. All those things that they found incredibly distasteful and incredibly, not patriotic. And it was like they held their nose, even to their own families. I mean, guys went back to their communities and their families. They had beefs. Those who supported war didn't welcome us. They saw us as losers, as deficient, lacking courage, all those really negative things. And the other side saw us as the worst aspects of the My Lai massacre types. What I saw among the group is just, we were just not doing well. Guys are just living self-destructive lives. People were really super angry and not happy. By the mid-'80s, we were seeing levels of poverty that was measured dramatically in the number of homeless veterans there were. At one point, veterans were barely 11, 12% of the total population, and they were almost, in some cities, over 40% of the homeless population. And half of those served in Vietnam or served during the Vietnam era. So they are way disproportionate. Clearly, one was connected to the other. The fact that there were no programs, that there was no meaningful employment and training, that veterans had been pushed out of their communities, that those very veterans had a heck of a time earning a living, getting a good job, especially racial minorities, Vietnam veteran racial minorities who really had problems. And we knew we had to help each other. Trying to put pressure on the VA to do a better job, have VA programs for Vietnam veterans, to recognize things like post-traumatic stress disorder, to recognize things like herbicide Agent Orange, that veterans were being exposed to having all these terrible toxic things. And we just got together and we formed a National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. We said there are issues, there are voices, the VSOs don't care about them. We got to do something. When you're really attached to the community, no one has to tell you what you need to do. The veterans will tell you what they need. And so over the years, we developed housing. We didn't, we never imagined ourselves as a homeless program or a housing development. It was just like a community-based organization helping low-income veterans, but that's where the need pushed us.
Under Blecker's leadership as executive director, Swords to Plowshares continued to evolve, adapting to the changing struggles of newer generations of soldiers.
What happened was the post-9/11 war came along. A lot of these young vets got their war wounds recognized, because at that point there were these new wounds, right? Traumatic brain injury, right? That was a new wound. And if you served in this period of time, and you have a medical problem, all these medical problems are aligned with exposure to this herbicide, these burn pits. And you automatically are eligible for service-connected disability compensation and for VA Priority 1 healthcare, all that. And they've actually estimated the cost, and that cost is not small. It's like, I think it's $270 billion over 10 years. But they only passed it, I think, in 2022. But, my fear is that's going to be dismantled. It's a very kind of a malicious and mean kind of administration out there. I've been fortunate or unfortunate because I've been served on these commissions where I've seen some of the, conservatives really, and what they really, who they are, and what their beliefs are. The way they perceive veterans are a lot like the way they perceive workers who are retired. These are former soldiers. They don't need them now. They already used them up. So what I saw in these commissions was the VA's been pulled out of their original mission. Their original mission was to help those who got shot up in the war, who had spinal injury stuff, really clear physical wounds that can be directly traced to a combat situation. Everything else, these invisible wounds, this trauma, that's all too much. And homeless services, they're not in the business of poverty. I think 60% of vets voted for Trump, but they didn't vote for getting their vet benefits cut back. It's not a red or a blue thing. It's around people trying to be treated with dignity and respect and care for themselves, and care for others.
Is there something that the general public can do to help?
It's a lot to ask, but you have these opportunities where there's hearings or people to voice support for something, and that makes a big difference if a board of supervisors doesn't hear just from the agency that gets the money or get paid by the grant. If they hear from folks who are just support the agency, that's a big deal.
The San Francisco Veterans Affairs Commission, which advises the mayor and board of supervisors, holds regular public meetings on issues like jobs, money, health, housing, and social services for veterans. Ikram Mansouri is a past president and current member of the San Francisco Veterans Affairs Commission.
The veteran community in San Francisco is definitely worried. They have every right to be. There's a deep concern about these cuts and what it means. It's pretty dangerous. Those who are vulnerable are going to be the first ones to see this, to feel the impact and suffer from this.
Mansouri served as a paratrooper and signals intelligence specialist. She had combat deployments in Operations Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, and New Dawn. She's relied on the San Francisco VA system for treatment of PTSD, balance issues, and hearing loss.
Our veterans are just chef's kiss. They're amazing, very resilient. I would just urge our city and county leaders to really, really keep veterans in the conversation. So like all the plannings, all the implementations of benefits, keep veterans a part of that.
Beyond her role as Veterans Affairs Commissioner, Mansouri has been deeply committed to supporting fellow veterans as COO of Vets in Tech. That's a program co-founded by Craig Newmark of Craigslist, who also supports the San Francisco Public Press. And it provides free training and employment opportunities to help veterans enter the tech industry.
We don't tap into any of their benefits. We focus on education, employment, and entrepreneurship. We're college accredited. We have amazing instructors and professors, and we teach anywhere from web dev, cloud computing, AI, ML, all the way to project management and like additional like non-technical skills. I always say like our veterans make them the great project managers, program managers, product managers, and people managers. Being based out of San Francisco, with Silicon Valley in our backyard, we have over 40 of the top tech giants as partners and sponsors who are able to offer positions and hire from within our students.
For more information or to sign up for courses, go to vetsintech.co. Across San Francisco and the country, groups are coming together to push back against the gutting of public services. The Federal Unionist Network, a new nationwide alliance of federal workers and allies, has been organizing protests, like this one outside the San Francisco Tesla dealership in February. Rebecca Solnit, a San Francisco writer, historian, and activist, provided words of encouragement.
We have so much power when we come together, and this is one of those moments when I think a whole lot of the country is coming together to take care of the climate, to take care of hungry babies and people with AIDS across the world, to take care of veterans, to take care of seniors, to take care of rivers, to take care of endangered species. And they really are bent on wrecking it all. Nobody knows how this ends, but the one thing I know is they're not writing this story themselves. We have the power to write this story, and we have the power to write the ending. Thank you.
As pressure mounts on federal agencies and the veterans they serve, the coming months will show whether public resistance can influence the course of these sweeping policy changes. I'm Sylvie Sturm, and you've been listening to Civic.
Civic comes to you from KSFP LP 102.5 FM in San Francisco, a project of the San Francisco Public Press, a nonprofit investigative newsroom. Find the accompanying article for this episode and all our reporting at sfpublicpress.org. Our theme music is by John Dillon. Additional music was supplied by the Blue Dot Sessions. Our team includes KSFP Program Director Mel Baker and Executive Director Lila LaHood. Find everything going on with Civic and the San Francisco Public Press by signing up for our newsletter at sfpublicpress.org/newsletter. Thanks for listening.